The night had fallen heavy over the forgotten village. The air was thick, colder than it should have been, and every tree stood still as if nature itself was holding its breath. A deep silence smothered the land, broken only by the distant cry of a lone crow perched atop a crooked branch. At the edge of the village lay the graveyard, ancient, vast, and endless. Tombstones leaned sideways, weathered by centuries, names carved so long ago that most had faded into nothing but cracks on grey stone. Moss clung to the edges of graves like claws, and the earth seemed damp, alive, as though something beneath it was waiting. The villagers always avoided this place after dark. They spoke of curses, of nights when the dead whispered from the soil, but tonight was not like any other night. Tonight, something greater stirred. The sky shifted suddenly, clouds roiling like dark smoke, and then it appeared. A colossal moon, red as fresh blood, pushed its way through the storm-filled sky. Its glow bled across the earth, drowning the world in crimson light. But this was no ordinary blood moon. It pulsed, as though alive, and from its lower edge dark liquid dripped, stretching downwards like strands of ink falling from a wound in the sky. Each drop hissed as it vanished into the clouds below. The villagers who saw it from their homes locked their doors and whispered prayers. They had heard the legend. When the blood moon drips, the dead will rise. But not everyone believed. 5 friends, Amir, Zara, Hina, Samir, and Bilal, were different. Young, curious, and reckless, they had grown tired of the old stories. To them, the legends were just ways to frighten children, tales invented by elders to keep people from wandering where they didn't belong. That night, while the rest of the village hid indoors, the friends gathered near the edge of the graveyard. Their flashlights cut thin beams into the mist. "Look at that moon," Zara whispered, her voice trembling despite her bravado. "It doesn't even look real." Samir laughed, forcing courage into his tone. "It's just a big red rock. What's the worst that could happen? Ghosts come out and say hello?" Bilal smirked, but Amir stayed quiet. He remembered his grandmother's warnings. She had once told him in a hushed voice, "When the sky bleeds, never step into the land of the dead. The soil will know your name." But now, standing there with his friends, even Amir couldn't resist the pull of curiosity. The graveyard called to them like a whisper on the wind. The group stepped through the rusted iron gates. The metal screeched as it moved, as though it resented being disturbed. Inside, the air was colder, thick with a strange smell, wet soil mixed with something metallic like blood. Their flashlights darted across crooked rows of gravestones. Shadows twisted unnaturally, stretching longer than they should have, bending with the light. The ground beneath their feet felt uneven, soft in places, as though hollow. And then they saw it. Between the graves, glowing veins of red liquid began to snake across the earth, weaving a path like rivers of molten fire. The streams pulsed faintly, keeping rhythm with the giant moon above. "What the hell is that?" Hina gasped, her hand clutching Zara's arm. "Looks like blood," Bilal whispered, his smirk fading. Samir crouched closer, his flashlight trembling in his grip. "Nah, it's probably some kind of chemical waste, right?" His voice cracked. He didn't believe himself. The streams continued to spread, seeping between graves, carving paths across the earth. The ground trembled softly underfoot, as though something beneath it was stirring. Then Zara froze. Her eyes widened in terror as she turned to Amir. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Hear what?" Amir asked, though his chest had already gone tight. "My name," she said, barely breathing. "It was my name. Someone said my name from under the ground." The others laughed nervously, trying to dismiss it, but the laughter died quickly, because one by one they began to hear it too. Whispers, faint, broken voices rising from the soil. At first they were only murmurs, but soon the words grew clearer. Amir, Zara, Hina, Bilal, Samir. Each name was spoken slowly, deliberately, as though tasted by something unseen. The whispers came from all directions, echoing off the stones, filling the graveyard until the friends could no longer tell where they originated. Samir's flashlight flickered, then went out completely. He shook it, panic rising. "Not funny! Who's doing this?" But there was no one. Only the endless rows of gravestones. Only the rivers of red, glowing stronger now, their light reflecting in the terrified eyes of the friends. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, chanting their names again and again until it became unbearable. The air turned icy, breath misting in the crimson glow, and then silence. A silence so complete it rang in their ears. The friends stood frozen, hearts pounding. Suddenly, a crack split the earth beneath a nearby grave. Soil shifted, stone tumbled, and something moved beneath the ground. A skeletal hand, blackened and dripping with glowing red liquid, clawed its way up into the night. The blood moon had begun its curse, and the friends were already trapped. The friends froze as the first skeletal hand pushed through the soil, its blackened fingers dripping with the same glowing liquid that flowed through the cracks of the earth. The friends froze as the first skeletal hand pushed through the soil, its blackened fingers dripping with the same glowing liquid that flowed through the cracks of the earth. The hand clawed desperately at the air before curling into the dirt, dragging up the rest of its body. A skull emerged, hollow sockets glowing with a red fire that pulsed in rhythm with the blood moon above. Its jaw hung open in a silent scream, rotten teeth gleaming as though wet with something foul. The sound of shifting soil and cracking bones spread across the graveyard. It wasn't just one. From every direction, graves stirred. Stones shifted, earth split, and skeletal forms began to claw their way free. Some rose tall, their bones sharp and jagged, while others dragged themselves with broken spines and twisted limbs. They were not simply skeletons. Their bones were soaked in red, glowing as though molten from the inside, each movement accompanied by the hiss of burning blood. The five friends stood in shock. Samir stumbled backward, shaking his head violently. No, this isn't real. This can't be real, he screamed. But his denial was shattered as one of the creatures lunged toward him. It was fast, faster than any human had a right to be. Samir turned and bolted, crashing through tombstones. His flashlight bounced wildly in the dark until it fell and shattered on the rocks. The others called after him, but their voices drowned in the unholy chorus of rattling bones and hissing whispers. The ground itself seemed alive, vibrating under their feet. "Stay together," Amir shouted, forcing strength into his voice though his insides were ice. They backed away as the first skeletons rose fully, their movements jerky, unnatural. Zara gripped Hina's arm so tightly her nails dug into flesh. Balal clenched his fists, trying to hide his trembling. From deeper in the graveyard, Samir's scream tore through the night. It wasn't just fear, it was pain. Then, silence. "Samir!" Zara shouted, but Amir pulled her back. "Don't! We can't." But it was too late. They saw him. Samir lay half-submerged in the glowing river, his body twitching as dozens of skeletal arms dragged him down. His face twisted in agony before vanishing beneath the surface. The red current swallowed him whole, leaving only ripples that quickly calmed. The friends were struck dumb with horror. Their laughter, their disbelief, all gone, replaced by the cold weight of reality. The legends were true. The dead had awakened. The group staggered deeper into the graveyard, desperately searching for a way out. But the blood rivers had spread further, carving fiery channels across the earth, cutting off familiar paths. The place had changed, reshaped into a labyrinth of death. The friends could hear movement everywhere. Shadows shifted behind gravestones, figures drifted between trees. The whispers grew louder again, clearer now, speaking not just names but words. "You cannot leave. You are ours. The pact must be kept." "What pact?" Hina cried out, her voice breaking. "What are they talking about?" Amir swallowed hard. "My grandmother, she used to tell me about it. She said that a long time ago the village made a deal. The dead would rest peacefully, but when the blood moon dripped, a sacrifice had to be made, or they would rise again." "A sacrifice?" Bilal spat, his fear turned to anger. "That's insane. That's just an old tale. You expect me to believe." His words cut off in a strangled gasp. From behind him, a skeletal figure had appeared, moving silently. Its jagged arm pierced straight through his chest, glowing blood dripping from the wound. Bilal coughed, his eyes wide with disbelief as the creature slowly pulled him backward into the shadows. His scream was muffled, cut short as the red glow swallowed him whole. Zara screamed, clutching Amir. Hina collapsed to her knees, sobbing. The group was now 3. The blood rivers widened, glowing brighter as if feeding on their fear. Each drop from the moon above sent a fresh surge of crimson light through the channels, like veins carrying life to something below. The remaining 3 stumbled across a cracked stone path that led to the heart of the graveyard. An old bridge stretched over the largest of the glowing rivers. The bridge was broken, stones crumbling, but it was the only way forward. "Come on," Amir urged, pulling Zara and Hina forward. "We can cross!" They stepped onto the bridge carefully. The blood river below churned violently, its surface alive with faces, screaming faces. Pale, hollow-eyed, their mouths stretched wide as they clawed at the air. They looked like the souls of the drowned, trapped forever in the current. Hina's steps faltered. She froze, staring down at the river. "Don't look," Amir shouted. "Just move." But it was too late. The faces below surged upward, forming dozens of skeletal arms that reached from the river. They grasped at Hina's legs, pulling her down. She screamed, clinging desperately to Zara's hand. "Don't let go," Zara cried, pulling with all her strength. But the arms were too many. They wrapped around Hina's waist, her shoulders dragging her closer to the crimson current. Her face contorted in terror. "Please, don't let me go," Zara sobbed, pulling harder, but Amir knew it was hopeless. The river wanted her. The pact demanded it. With one final piercing scream, Hina was pulled under. Her hand slipped from Zara's grip, vanishing beneath the surface. The river glowed brighter for a moment, then stilled again as if satisfied. Zara collapsed, trembling uncontrollably, her face pale. Amir pulled her up, forcing her to move despite her grief. They were two now, only two. Deeper into the graveyard they went, the whispers surrounding them like a storm. The air grew heavy with the stench of rot and burning iron. The ground cracked open ahead, revealing a massive stone door buried in the earth, glowing faintly with red light. The whispers hushed. For a moment, the graveyard went silent, as though everything waited. Then the door began to move. Stone scraped against stone as it slowly opened, releasing a wave of heat and the stench of centuries-old decay. The ground shook violently, nearly throwing Amir and Zara to their knees. From within the crypt, chains rattled. A deep, inhuman growl echoed through the night. The glowing rivers surged toward the door, feeding it, fueling whatever waited inside. Amir and Zara stared in horror as a monstrous figure began to rise. A titan of bone and shadow, its skull larger than a man's body, eyes burning with red fire. Chains clung to its limbs, dragging behind it the wailing spirits of the damned. The keeper of the blood moon had awakened, and it was hungry. This completes Act 2, 1,200 words, with rising horror, deaths of Samir, Bilal and Hina, and the reveal of the Blood Moon Keeper. Do you want me to continue with Act 3, The Blood River, 1,1200 words, in the same chilling narration? The blood moon rose higher, its immense frame towering over the graveyard, its chains dragged against the stone, scraping sparks, each link pulsing with trapped, screaming faces. The sound of wailing filled the night, so loud that Amir and Zara covered their ears, yet the cries still dug into their minds. The monster's empty eyes burned with living fire. When it opened its jaw, the ground trembled. Its voice was not a sound, it was a vibration that shook bones and churned blood. The pact was broken, the dead demand flesh, the river must feed. Zara staggered backward, shaking her head. No, this isn't real. It can't be real. But the red rivers surged in agreement, glowing brighter. The keeper raised one massive skeletal hand, and the currents of blood obeyed. The rivers rose like serpents, twisting and writhing through the air, cutting off every escape. Amir grabbed Zara's arm. "We need to move. Now!" They ran, their feet pounding against cracked stone, weaving through crooked rows of gravestones. The whispers of the dead followed, chanting their names with every step. Hands clawed from the earth, trying to trip them, skeletal figures reaching, moaning, always one step behind. The blood river followed them, splitting and merging like a predator made of liquid fire. The ground quaked as it devoured everything in its path, swallowing graves whole. They stumbled onto a ruined bridge, the same one where Hina had been lost. Amir hesitated. The river below churned violently, faces pressing upwards, screaming in agony. It was as if the very souls of the dead were trapped inside, begging for release. "We can't cross this!" Zara shouted, tears streaming down her face. "We don't have a choice." Amir dragged her forward. They stepped onto the broken stones. The bridge groaned under their weight, threatening to collapse. The blood below surged higher, reaching for them with 100 skeletal arms. The faces shrieked louder, their mouths stretching impossibly wide. Halfway across, Zara slipped. Her foot broke through a loose stone, and for a moment she dangled above the red current, her reflection staring back at her, her own face twisted into one of the screaming souls. She cried out as Amir pulled her back onto the bridge. "Don't look down! Just run!" he shouted. They sprinted across, the bridge crumbling behind them. As they leapt onto the far side, the last of the stones collapsed into the river. A wall of blood erupted upward, splashing against the sky before slamming back down with the force of a wave. The pair rolled onto the ground, coughing, soaked in crimson mist, but their relief was short-lived. Ahead, the graveyard opened into a wide clearing, the earth split by a massive chasm glowing from within. At the center of the chasm stood the keeper. It had followed them effortlessly, its massive body moving like a shadow, silent yet unstoppable. Chains rattled as it lifted one arm. From the ground, dozens of skeletal figures rose again, each dripping with molten red. They formed a circle around Amir and Zara, trapping them. Zara clutched Amir's arm, whispering through sobs, "We're going to die here." Amir's mind raced. He remembered his grandmother's words. When the sky bleeds, a life must be offered willingly. Could that still be true? Could a sacrifice appease the keeper? But before he could speak, the keeper moved. Its chains lashed forward, striking the ground near them, splintering stone like glass. The force threw Amir and Zara apart. Amir rolled across the dirt, gasping for air, while Zara scrambled backward, nearly falling into the glowing river at the chasm's edge. The skeletal minions closed in, their bones cracking with every step. Their hollow sockets glowed brighter, fixated on the living. Amir staggered to his feet, grabbing a broken gravestone shard. It was useless against such monsters, but he swung anyway, shattering one skeleton's jaw before another slammed him to the ground. The shard cut into his palm as he fought desperately, bones digging into his flesh. Across the clearing, Zara screamed as the blood river rose again, forming a wall behind her. Hands reached out, clawing, pulling her closer. She fought them off, kicking, sobbing, her voice breaking into the night. "Amir, help me!" He pushed himself up, covered in blood and dirt, and charged toward her. He swung the stone wildly, knocking back skeletal arms, tearing her free from their grasp. The two clung to each other, trembling. The keeper watched, silent as though amused. Its chains coiled like snakes, ready to strike again. Then the whispers grew louder, so loud they drowned even the keeper's growl. They came not from the graves, but from the blood river itself. A life must be given. A life must be given. Amir and Zara stared at each other, realization dawning. One of them would have to die, or both would be consumed. Zara shook her head violently. "No, don't even think it, Amir. We'll find another way. We'll survive together." But Amir saw the keeper's massive form moving closer, its shadow swallowing them. He saw the red river stretching upward, hungry, waiting, and he knew. "There is no other way," he whispered, his voice breaking. "No!" Zara cried, clutching him tightly. "I won't let you." The keeper raised its chained arms high, preparing to strike, the ground splitting wider with every second. The red glow illuminated the clearing, casting their faces in a ghostly light. Amir's grip tightened on the shard of gravestone. His hand bled freely, dripping onto the soil. The whispers grew frantic, hungrier, echoing in his skull. The blood river surged higher, the keeper roared, and Amir made his choice. He stepped forward, pushing Zara back, and raised the shard to his own chest. "Forgive me," he whispered. "This is the only way." Zara screamed as he drove the shard deep into his heart. Blood gushed, spilling into the soil, rushing toward the river like it had been waiting for this moment. The red current absorbed it instantly, glowing brighter, rising to the sky in a massive crimson wave. The keeper froze, its chains halting mid-strike. Its fiery eyes dimmed, watching as Amir's life poured into the river. The skeletal minions crumbled into ash, collapsing in heaps around Zara. The whispers faded into silence. Zara knelt over Amir, her hands trembling, tears streaking down her blood-stained face. His breath was shallow, fading. "You saved me," she whispered, clutching him. Amir's lips curled into a weak smile. "Not just you, but remember, the moon will rise again." His body went limp. The keeper lowered its chains, its massive form retreating into the chasm. The blood river calmed, flowing like ordinary water before vanishing into the cracks. The earth trembled one last time, then stilled. The blood moon still hung above, but it no longer dripped. It glowed faintly, quiet, as though satisfied, for now. Zara collapsed beside Amir, sobbing, her cries echoing in the silence of the graveyard. But as the camera of the night pulled back, the ground beneath the graves stirred once more. Countless hands twitched just below the soil, waiting restless. Because the keeper's final words lingered in the air like a curse. The debt is delayed, not broken. When the blood moon rises again, all souls shall rise with me. The graveyard was silent again. No more whispers, no more rattling chains, only the wind moving softly through the crooked tombstones, as though the land itself had taken a long, relieved breath. Zara sat in the dirt, clutching Amir's lifeless body. His blood stained her hands, his final sacrifice still fresh in her mind. She rocked back and forth, whispering his name, begging him to open his eyes. But the silence answered her, cold and merciless. Above, the massive blood moon loomed, no longer dripping, but still watching. Its crimson glow washed over the graves like a torch over forgotten ruins. To Zara, it looked less like a moon and more like a single, unblinking eye. The keeper was gone, retreated into its chasm, sealed once more by Amir's blood. The skeletal minions had crumbled, their bones dissolving into ash that blew away in the night wind. The blood rivers had sunk into the earth, leaving only black scars across the ground. But Zara could not feel safe. Not truly, because Amir's final words echoed in her ears, haunting her more deeply than the screams of the dead ever had. The moon will rise again. Her tears dried slowly, leaving her hollow. She stood, trembling, and forced herself to look at the graveyard around her. It was ruined, shattered stones, scorched earth, yawning cracks where the blood rivers had once flowed. Every grave looked disturbed, as though the earth had been torn open and stitched shut again. Her friends were gone, Samir, Bilal, Hina, all swallowed by the curse. And now Amir, too. She was the last one left. Zara stumbled toward the graveyard gate, her legs weak, her mind fogged. The iron bars were bent and rusted, but they stood open as if inviting her out. For a moment she almost believed she was free, but as she stepped across the threshold she froze. The air beyond the graveyard was wrong. The village, in the distance, sat in silence, no lights glowing in the windows. The fields around it looked burned, blackened as though fire had swept through in her absence. The silence stretched too far, too deep, as if the entire world was holding its breath. And then she heard it. Not the whispers of the dead this time, but a single voice. Low, hollow, echoing inside her mind. The debt is delayed, not broken. Zara turned back toward the graveyard. The blood moon seemed closer now, larger, its surface boiling like molten rock. For a moment she swore it was smiling at her, cracks forming in its surface like jagged teeth. Her heart pounded. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body wouldn't move. From the far side of the graveyard, soil shifted again. Slowly, silently, a single skeletal hand rose from the ground, curling into the air. Then another, then dozens. They weren't rising to attack her. Not yet. They were waiting. Waiting for the moon to drip again. Zara's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled backward, tripping over the roots at the edge of the gate. Her eyes locked on the graves as more hands emerged, twitching just beneath the surface like 1,000 corpses preparing for the signal to awaken. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "It's over. It has to be over." But she knew the truth. This night was only the beginning. The final shot would linger on the blood moon above, glowing hotter, redder, dripping again. Just one drop, falling slowly through the sky like fresh blood from a wound. It landed with a hiss on the soil of the graveyard, and the earth quivered in response. Then darkness. And the story ends with the keeper's curse, still alive, waiting for the next cycle. The night of the blood moon.